In this video, we're going to talk about animals, their tissues, their organs, and their systems. So a hierarchy of organization. So there are levels of organization. So we start with cells. Cells group themselves into tissues. So specialized cells perform specialized functions. Tissues further organize themselves into organs. So your heart, your kidney, and so on. Then organs group themselves into systems. So your circulatory system, your digestive system, your respiratory system. And then systems all work together to form an organism. That's how we're formed into who we are and how we function. So in grade 10, we only look at 3 or 4 of the systems. However, there are many organ systems in the body. So the 3 that we're going to hone in on this unit are the circulatory system, the digestive system, and the respiratory system. Again, we're just going to give a fairly brief overview of even them. We just need to understand that cells organize into tissues, organs, and organ systems for grade 10. But if you go further into grade 11 and grade 12 biology, you'll learn about the other systems that are involved. And you'll learn about the circulatory, digestive, and respiratory system in deeper detail. We also have an immune system, a nervous system, an excretory system, so that's getting rid of waste in the body. So our kidneys and bladder are responsible for that. Your endocrine system has to do with making hormones to make your whole body function. Your reproductive system, your skeletal system, and your muscular system. Our digestive system, there's 2 different kinds of digestion that happens. So mechanical digestion is a physical breakdown of food, and that's caused by your teeth, by your stomach churning, so muscles will help grind up food and break it into smaller pieces as well. And then chemical digestion is when the food is broken down using chemical reactions that involve enzymes, which are molecules that build things up and break things down. And then hydrochloric acid is also involved in chemical digestion. Again, you'll learn that in more detail in grade 11 biology. So here's a brief overview of our digestive system. So we are a tube feeder, so food goes in one end and out the other. So we have our mouth, which leads to our esophagus, which is the tube that carries your food to your stomach. Your stomach acts on the food. It sends it then to the small intestine, which is actually longer than the large intestine, but it's called the small intestine because it's narrower. And then the small intestine leads into the large intestine, which actually frames it like a little box. It's larger because it's wider, not because it's longer. And then the waste goes to the rectum and then released through the anus. There are other organs that are involved too that the food doesn't go to, but they make enzymes and secretions that dump into the digestive system to help break food down. So the liver and the gallbladder, the liver makes bile and the gallbladder stores it and then releases it. And then your pancreas, which is right here, it has a lot of functions, but when we look at the digestive system, it makes enzymes to help digest the food. It also makes hormones called insulin and glucagon that monitors your blood sugar levels, but that's an endocrine function, not a digestive function. Enzymes. They're chemicals that break food down into usable parts. So they break down lipids or fats. They break down carbohydrates. We sometimes call them sugars and starches. And they break down protein into amino acids. The first enzyme that starts acting is in your mouth, and it's called salivary amylase. It starts breaking down starch. And then more enzymes act in the stomach, but the majority of our enzymes are found in the small intestine. So we've talked about all of these structures already. So your oral cavity or mouth, that's where mechanical and chemical digestion happens. The esophagus is a long tube that carries food from your mouth to your stomach, and it moves it through a process called peristalsis. It's almost like when you're trying to squeeze toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube. That's how the food moves down to your stomach. The stomach can churn and grind. So it does some mechanical digestion. It mixes your food up with some digestive juices to churn it all up like a blender. And then also chemical digestion. So there's chemicals that are breaking the food down. The small intestine, more digestion happens there, and the nutrients get absorbed so that they can go to your cells and give you energy. The large intestine absorbs the water, and then the rectum and the anus egests the waste. So anything that you don't want anymore, it exits through the body through the anus. As I mentioned before, your liver, which is a very large organ, aside from your skin, it's actually the largest organ. It creates bile to help digest fat or lipids. Your gallbladder stores that bile, and your pancreas makes lots of enzymes that are involved in digestion. Now let's take a look at our circulatory system. It's made of your heart and all your blood vessels, so your veins, your arteries, and your capillaries. And its job is to transport oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste throughout your body. There's a fun video if you want to take a look called the Blood Mobile on YouTube, and it's kind of fun watching how the circulatory system is responsible for that. Your heart is about the size of your fist, and is found in the center of your thoracic cavity or your chest, and it's tilted slightly to the left. So that's why people always say your heart is on the left side of your body. It's not really. It's kind of right in the middle, but it kind of tips to the left. So that's why people say it's on the left. So let's look at the details that you need to know. You need to know that blood flows through your heart. Your heart has 4 chambers, the left and the right atria, which are on the top, and the left and the right ventricles, which are on the bottom. So blood on the right side of the body comes from the blood on the right side of the heart comes from the body and is deoxygenated. So it's used up its oxygen throughout. It then gets sent to the lungs to be oxygenated, to collect some oxygen and get rid of the extra carbon dioxide. And then it returns to the left side of the heart. And then the blood leaves the left side of the heart through the aorta and then is pumped to the rest of your body. So this is a diagram of the heart, and really for grade 10, you just need to know that there's 4 chambers. Now, this was always hard for me because I had a hard time learning my lefts and my rights at the best of times. And if you look at this diagram, it looks like this is mislabeled, but it's not. We always talk about the organ as if it's in the person. So we're looking at somebody's heart. So if you flipped the person around and you became you, it looks like it's on the left, but that's because we're facing the organ. So the right side of the organ is on the left of the picture. So this is the right atrium and the right ventricle. And this is the left atrium and the left ventricle. Some things to note: there's more muscle. All the stuff surrounding it is the muscle that pumps the heart. There's more muscle on the left side of the heart because it has to pump hard enough to push the blood out of the left ventricle through the aorta and to the entire body. So there's a lot more muscle here, where the right ventricle, it only has to pump blood to the lungs, which is not that far from the heart. So it's less muscly than the left side. The atria aren't very muscly at all either, because all they have to do is pump their blood from the atrium to the ventricle. And then the right ventricle pumps to the lungs, the left ventricle pumps to the whole body. So that's why it's thicker. Capillaries are tiny blood vessels. So the aorta and the pulmonary arteries, they branch off into structures called arterioles, which branch off into more and more and more. And eventually you end up with capillaries. They're very small, and they surround every cell in our body. They're located in all your organs and tissues. In the digestive system, they surround your small intestine, and that's how you absorb the nutrients. And then they carry the nutrients to every cell in your body to give it energy. And then in the lungs, they surround the alveoli. They're the air sacs in your lungs. And they allow oxygen to diffuse into the blood, and then the carbon dioxide diffuses out. The respiratory system allows for gas exchange. So we have to be able to get oxygen out of the air. The air isn't 100% oxygen, it's only about 20%, 21%. So we need to get some oxygen out of the air, and then we need to get rid of the carbon dioxide that we've built up as a waste product in our cells to be exhaled. And our lungs aren't big hollow balloons. They're actually like sponges. So they're filled with thousands and thousands of tiny little air sacs called alveoli, which allow for an increased surface area for gas exchange. So it's better to have a whole bunch of tiny little sacs for a couple of reasons. One, more surface area for gas exchange. And two, if some of those air sacs got punctured, you're not in a whole lot of trouble, because if your lung was one giant balloon and you punctured your balloon, suddenly you can't get any air in. Whereas with alveoli, some of them can burst and break and get damaged, but you still have thousands and thousands or millions more to take over. This is a picture of our respiratory system, and some things are overlapping. So here we go. This is our mouth again, our nasal passage. So behind our breathing passages is still our esophagus. Right here, this is in our pharynx, is our larynx, and that's your voice box or your vocal cords. Those vibrate and make sounds, and depending on how they vibrate, depends on the sounds that you make. So you can make different pitches and loudness and volumes and so on. We have two lungs, one on either side of our trachea. So our trachea is our breathing passage. It looks rigid and ridgy because it's made of cartilage, and there's these cartilaginous rings that maintain the shape. You don't want your trachea to collapse, so it's rigid to stay open. And then you have the trachea breaks into bronchi and bronchioles, and at the very bottom of all these branches that branch and branch and branch are those air sacs. We can't see them in the picture. Our lungs and everything, all our organs, are protected by our rib cage. So here's a close-up of an alveolus. So here is our air coming in and our little alveolus. We can see that there's carbon dioxide and oxygen being transferred. Here's the capillaries that are surrounding the alveolus. And you can see here a different picture. So they almost look like little clusters of grapes. They're tiny little sacs at the ends of the bronchioles, and they're surrounded by blood vessels, capillaries, so that the gases can exchange. So in class, we're going to do a little activity studying the effects of posture on your heart rate. Do you think there's going to be a difference if you're standing or sitting or lying down with your heart rate? So you're going to try that. So you're going to come up with a hypothesis on what you think might happen. You'll create a data table to record your observations, and at the end, you'll analyze your data and write a conclusion. And in the conclusion, you need to make sure that you write your sources of error and your suggestions for improvement to your procedure. So what sorts of things could have affected your activity? So did you maybe not count well enough? Maybe your method for counting your heart rate was faulty, and so on. Another thing we'll be doing very shortly will be dissecting a frog. So the reason why we use a frog, they do have a lot of the same internal organs that we do. So we study them at grade 10 level so that we can see how organs can be organized into systems. So there's a diagram of the frog.